word search puzzle handout, we'll be getting started. And a little ticker, or do I need to just
You're going to have to.
You can look over there and see it too without having to look
good.
up.
That's
I
gonna be
love
easier
that.
on my neck.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, so why is this important? There are lots of techniques out there for crafts or projects or physical add-ons like flannel boards where it's a specific physical prop-like thing. But this one actually is a little bit more versatile because it shows you how to prepare for any kind of storytelling or presentational program. You can do a memorized thing, you can do a tandem or solo, for any theme, for any culture, for any subject. It doesn't matter. This is going to be something that you can use for anything. The focus, the title of this one is Behind the Scenes because as we remember from all of the P's that we learned from that lecture, behind the scenes and beforehand is where all the important preparation work happens, is behind the scenes. So, an overview of what we're going to be covering. This is a 5-step program. You're going to choose your subject and your audience. You're going to narrow your topic with the limits provided by step 1. You're going to research the story and then write the draft. You're going to create your story body, which is the bones, the heart, and the clothes of your story. And then you're going to perform it. You're going to reevaluate what you did, and then you're going to edit because no one's ever perfect the first time. And even if it was really cool, you're going to find something that you want to do differently or improve now that you've actually performed it in front of real people. So, next slide. Ground zero. First, you're going to choose your subject. You want to pick something that you're passionate about, something that you're really interested in. And you also want to pick something that covers a lot of ground. You want a lot of variety and a lot of options. So an example I put up there is Johnny Appleseed is a bad option to start with as a subject because he's too specific. There's only so many stories about Johnny Appleseed. As your beginning subject, you could think a little broader and go for American Tall Tales. So you've got lots of options there. You've got Johnny Appleseed, you've got John Henry, you've got some of the presidents, you've got George Washington and the Cherry Tree, you've got the Civil War, you've got tornadoes and Paul Bunyan and all this kind of stuff that you can draw from. Another example for me, I started with wanting to tell a St. Patrick story. That's a bad example because he's too specific. It's also a bad example because for a secular library program, St. Patrick is a religious figure. And so most of his stories are either very specifically religious in overtones or they make specific reference to miracles, which might be something that you want to avoid. Not necessarily, but it's something to keep an eye out for. So for my good example for this, my subject is Irish myths and folktales. That gives me a lot of ground to cover, a lot of options to think about, and I can narrow it down later. Because what I'm doing next is choosing my audience. Every audience is going to need something different. Storytellers also often have preferences. I prefer telling the kids because grown-ups scare me. Little kids I find are a little bit more accepting, so if you screw up, they don't really care. And grown-ups, I always feel like they're judging. That's something that's on me, not on the audience, but it is something that you have to take into account. If you have a preference and you get stage fright when you're telling to adults, perhaps choosing a program that has you tell to adults is not the best option. And then there's also needs as far as the program itself goes. Adults can handle mature themes. They can handle dark or complicated plots, and they can handle complex characters. Kids need things to be a little bit more straightforward. They want characters that are simple. They want plots that are boom, 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 and a climax. And then there's also limitations on your story itself because adults have pretty decent attention spans. You can tell a story to a group of adults and it can last 20 or 30 minutes. And as long as you're a good storyteller and it's a good story, you're going to keep them for that 20 or 30 minutes. There's not a kid in the universe that's going to be able to pay attention to his 30-minute storytelling. And if there is, there's 20 other ones that you've lost after 10 minutes, and now they're distracting the one kid who wants to pay attention. So you need to take into account your length of time for your story as well. Kids usually need between 5 and 15 minutes based on age. It ranges up as they get older. So, next, we have chosen our audience and we have chosen our subject. So now what we're going to use is those limitations to narrow the focus. This will give you a decent set of guidelines. So, example for me, I want to do a memorized secular story for toddlers in the genre of Irish folklore. So Irish folklore gives us leprechauns, we've got St. Patrick, we've got the Fae, we've got in the pool. Leprechauns are really short, they don't really have a plot. So Fae stories, they're really complicated, they're like so all these complicated, melodramatic characters with super interrelated things, and the stories never really end, so no, that's not going to work. St. Patrick's Tales, they're religious, so that screws out the whole secular thing. So, Finn McCool. Now I've got to think about the length of my story. There's a lot of Finn McCool stories. He builds a causeway for his wife Una, that's too short. The Salmon of Wisdom, it's too long and too complicated for toddlers. Knockmany Hill, that's where he builds the house and has all the complicated bits where he throws the stones and builds the well and turns the house around 6 ways from Sunday. It's all fractured. There's not really a plot at all. It's just a selection of events that happen around the house. So that leaves us with his wife Una outwitting Cuchulainn. Bingo! I've got a story. So you see how the limitations that I've chosen, the subject that I chose, narrows down slowly to something specific that I can use, and the audience limitations that I've chosen also give me guidelines to narrow it down to something that's going to be appropriate for them. That's why you want to choose your audience and your subject first, then narrow, rather than set your heart on a really specific story, because then it might not be appropriate for the audience that you end up doing, and you don't want to feel like you have to shoehorn it in, because that's what you really want to do. Next up, research and write. By now you've got a specific, particular story that you want to tell. You want to find every version of that story that you can. This is what I found with the library search that I was just able to get, not through an interlibrary loan. You want to read these stories. You want to listen to these stories. You want to watch them. I found the video. You want to research the background on them. I found out that Finn McCool isn't actually Irish at all. He's Scottish. He's from an earlier cycle of myths. He's actually a tragic Scottish laird that got cursed by the Fae. The only time that he shows up in Irish mythology is as sort of the tall-tale giant for clever stories of overcoming obstacles as a giant, which is interesting. You want to focus on what your story needs, not what's already out there, which is why you want to do so much research and find so many variations, because you want to pick and choose. I want to focus on the specifics of the character. I want to have a story that's short enough for my toddlers, so I'm going to be very specific and just kind of pull bits from every single variation that I can find. You're going to write probably several drafts if you end up doing this as a story time. So the first draft is just the basics. What happens to who, and to whom does it happen? Draft 2, you want to read it out loud and make sure that it's in comfortable verbal language for you. What I've found is that most people use very different words when they're writing than when they're speaking, and most people also use very different sentence structure when they're writing than when they're speaking. So when you write something out as a paper or something for people to read, you're going to use very different language than you do when you're talking to people. And you want to make your draft to be in comfortable narrative language for you. So that means that you need to read it out loud and notice whenever you change words or flip things around or make substitutions, because you want to stick with whatever's most comfortable for you speaking, so that you don't have to put any extra strain on your brain. The third draft, you want to use theatrical tricks and dramatic tricks to add interest and drama to it. So you're going to use things like repetition. In my story, the repetition is the baby had an awfully big and then going on. Building with emphasis is taking an idea and then building it and then building it and then building it and then using it as the climax key at the very end of the story. So what a big baby that is. Did that baby eat that hard bread? Did that baby just eat that rock? And then by the end of it, that's the key for the climax, is that that big baby does something that he's not supposed to. And then you're going to use structure, which is to have a very clear beginning, middle, and climax for the story. So now we're done with our research and our writing, and we're moving on to our final draft, which is where the extras come in. This is the bones, the heart, the clothes, and then the extra. The bones is a super simple, basic plot. The heart is the characters and tone, and the clothes are the extras that you're using. You want to look at your script again and edit it to make sure that you're true to each individual element. So for my examples, for the bones of the story, I simplified the story a lot. In most of these stories, they include the causeway for Una. They include a mention of the Salmon of Wisdom. They have a whole big interim section where Cuchulainn is moving the house around and doing all sorts of errands for Una. I got rid of all that. I don't need it. It's not important to the story. It doesn't move the plot forward. I just wanted a straightforward linear plot. So I got rid of all of it. I also made it less violent. In several of these stories, Finn beats Cuchulainn to death, actually kills him in the house. There's a lot of wrestling. In all of the versions that I have here, Finn bites Cuchulainn's finger off at the end, which gets rid of Cuchulainn's magical power, so he's reduced to be just a weeny little human. I got rid of that. the violence is also part of the heart, because I want it to be, I want the tone of the story to be funny and unrealistic and kind of silly. I don't want it to be serious or frightening in any way. And then the clothes, which for me, my extra is having a sign language tandem teller, which is where we get into the little book that I provided, because each extra that you have is going to need different preparation, which is our next slide. Extras need preparation. This is just an example of what I did for mine. The preparation for your extras are going to be different. That's what the little booklets are for. What I had to do is, after I created my draft and I got my narrative down how I wanted it, it was in natural speaking language for me, and I was comfortable with it. I had to do a secondary run of language and timing revisions with Tia to make it suitable for sign language. There are some signs that don't exist for things. There are some signs that take longer than their spoken counterparts to get through, specifically names when they first come up. Things like frying pans or cribs are long, complicated, multi-part signs, whereas the word crib is pretty short in English. And then there's alternately other signs that are much shorter. So a lot of descriptions or a lot of things where we use a big long phrase to get to an idea. The sign for that is a very quick gloss. And so what we had to do was change what we could without sacrificing the story, and then rehearse together and see what alterations need to be made to the language in the script so that we keep our tempo together. And then third, of course, which is the same for whatever extra you do, practice, 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 so that the extra is integrated into the story. Okay, so this is the last bit. Practice performance reevaluation and editing, PRE. So focus. While you're in the moment, you're performing. Don't think about, oh, I could have done this better, or I needed to have done this, or I should have changed that. Once you're actually on stage doing this for people, just do it. You can fix things later. You want to use a recording device. If you've got a friend with a camera, or you can set one up in the corner, or even if you can just get one of those little audio recorders just to record the audio, it's better than nothing. You want to get a review. You want to find someone in the audience or plant someone in the audience who's a coworker or a friend to watch you and take notes specifically to help you out, and to remember not to take it personally, because they're here to help you improve. And then after the performance, that's when you want to do the reevaluation. You want to watch the recording. You want to talk to the evaluator that you put in the audience. You want to maybe have left a survey with your audience so that they can leave feedback for you or tell you how you did. You look at that critically and see what you can improve, what you can change, and then you edit your program, you practice it again, and then you perform it again. And as you go, each time it improves, and then you've got something solid that you can add to your repertoire and use in a lot of different venues. So that's all the specifics of the actual technique. And now that I've bored you all to tears, we'll see if I can't. There's no actual screen here, so this is going to be
Oh, just hit enter.
interesting.
Isn't,
Because I have to navigate by, see over there.
if you hit enter, it doesn't come up?
No, the screen here is dark. Oh dear.
You can try function F8, and that might. And so you find
Oh,
yours,
now I have
and
one,
then
but it turned off. Okay.
Then you transfer what you want.
Oh, gotcha.